Welcome to the Bear With Me podcast. I'm your host, Jay, a 34-year-old black man in America who also happens to be a nudist. Now, that's not just a fun fact, it's a fundamental part of how I move through this world. My identity as a black man and a nudist has deeply shaped the way I see myself, others, and the systems around me. I didn't stumble into nudism. I arrived here through a powerful journey of self-discovery, vulnerability, and body positivity. Along the way, I realized that my story isn't just mine. It's one that could resonate with others who are also trying to strip away shame and step into freedom. So here we are. Welcome to my world. Raw, real, and unapologetically bare. This space is about reflection, connection, and peeling back the layers to uncover truth, joy, and liberation. If you decided to tune in today, I don't take it lightly. Thank you. I truly believe this journey will be worth it. Bear with me. Welcome to the Bear With Me podcast. I am your host, Jay, and today we have Dr. Mal, who is the creator and host of A Monday Moment with Dr. Mal, on the podcast with us today. Dr. Mal, say hello to the people.
Well, hello, everyone. Like Jay said, I'm Dr. Mal. That's my moniker I go by. I am a podcast host, but that's one of many things that I do. I really have found more value in talking about who I am more than what I do. The things that I do color who I am. And so I feel as though I am a kind person, a loving person, and my gift is to connect with others in most authentic ways as possible. One of my things in my life journey right now is learning how to connect with myself authentically so that I can connect with others authentically. And actually, Jay and I have had several conversations about authenticity and what that looks like and what that sounds like. And actually, I can say I'm grateful for the conversations that we've had because it's allowed me to reflect on my authenticity and how I'm communicating it to others. And so, yeah, I do a lot of things. You can check me out on my website. I'm sure we'll talk about it later to see all the things that I do. But I'm just a kindred soul moving through this timeline, and I'm excited to be here.
Before we jump in and get started, I just wanted to kind of reflect on how we met. From your point of view, do you remember anything about how we met?
So I actually do not remember how we met because I mean, well, first of all, my memory is not long, but also I just, I don't know that it was an authentic meeting. We are in a fraternity and sorority that's bound together. And so sometimes when I meet people in that way, it's always in passing. It's because they have the same colors as me. And I walk up on them, and of course, I give them a hug, say hi, and then ask them their name. But I will be honest and say that if they are not my paradigm, I'm most often forgetting it, what their name is. And so, yeah, I just don't feel like it's the most authentic way to meet someone. But recently, we reconnected, and it's through the podcast world. And I feel like our reconnection has been the most authentic meeting. And like, yeah, like I feel like I know you now. I didn't know you before I knew of you, but I didn't know you in that way, in the way that I know you now. So,
Yeah, so I think that thinking back, so I initially remember meeting you in like spring 2009. You were on campus supporting a Zeta event, and so we kind of met in passing. You know, you were, I think, already leaving the university when I was getting there. As a first year student, we kind of looked up to, the upperclassmen and some of the alumni that would come around. So always knew who you were. Couldn't say that I was really familiar. And then maybe about a few months ago, I was actually on Instagram and I came across your profile because I think a mutual friend or something had maybe reshared it, or it just popped up on my timeline. And I looked at the picture and I was like, wait, I know who this is. And
Mm.
so I knew that we were, in a constitutionally bound organization. So I just took a chance and just reached out. And to my surprise, within maybe about an hour or so, you shot me a message back. And although I am a millennial, I feel like I'm one of the older millennials in a sense that, social media can only take me so far, right? And so my goal is to immediately reach out to people that I make connections with just so it can be authentic. And so we had our initial conversations, just kind of sharing about the things that we do. And I knew from then that, one, I had a friend and a sister for life, but also that we could definitely work and support each other in our podcast spaces. So I thank you for being here. To jump right into the episode, thinking back, what are some of the first messages, I guess, that you received about bodies? So whether that's clothed or nude, like what was some of the first messages that you learned, and where did you get those from?
Mm. So this is certainly has been in the past a sensitive subject for me, and I have not talked about it. And I've not talked about it publicly. So trigger warning for those of my friends who are listening that also may have experienced what I experienced. But I am a sexual molestation survivor, and I did not. It has not been my whole entire life that has been able to roll off my tongue like that. There has been a lot of shame that I've experienced in my life because of that experience, but I had to move through uh, the shame and the guilt that I felt to get to a point where I can at least say that I survived that, and maybe not even take responsibility for that, because I think I was trying to take responsibility because the adults that were in my life that I shared it with weren't taking responsibility. Like I said
Mm-hmm.
something and nothing was done about it. And so it was just like I was left to fend for myself, but I didn't know quite how to move through what I was moving through because I was young, number one. Number two, when you're in those situations, like it's a mind trip because you're it feels good, pleasure feels good, but you also know that this is not right. Like this is not something that should be happening. And so to answer your question, I know the message that I received through that experience was that my body was not for me. And it wasn't to be respected by others, and that boundaries that I had, whether overt or covert, didn't matter. And honestly, the only space I felt that my body was safe was at school, because I knew at school we had to be and had it was there was rules in place. There were regulations in place and we had clothes on. So there's that part too, like that nothing adversive was happening to me at school. Of course, I was bullied and stuff like that, but it wasn't in the way that it was happening to me and in regard to my body at home. And so, yeah, that's the first message that I received about my body.
Well, first, before we move to the second question, I do want to take a moment just to say, thank you. I appreciate you for just jumping right in and being vulnerable and sharing
Mhm.
that experience. I think that unfortunately, people are living with similar truths, right? And a lot of times people aren't at a place where they can speak to it. So it definitely shows that you have grown to a point where you can, at least acknowledge what happened and that you're willing to share that. And I hope that, if anybody is listening who has experienced this or something similar, or maybe connected to someone who's experiencing this, that they can find comfort in your words. So thank you for sharing that. I guess in kind of connected to the first question, can you reflect a little bit about maybe conscious or subconscious lessons that you learned around nudity, shame, and body awareness?
Sure. So I actually, while growing up, I've come from a divorced family. So my mom and dad divorced when I was very young. I was like 2 or 3. And so I always lived in 2 different lives. Life was different at my dad's house than it was at my mom's house, and the environment was different. I'm the oldest of 6, and so, my mom went on to have 4 other kids in her second marriage. And so my sister, that's a year and a day younger than me, she and I have the same mom and dad, so we grew up having a similar life. Because even we know we can grow up in the same house as our siblings and be completely different. So I say similar, even though we were experiencing the same things, because we are different. It was different. So anyway, like I said, my parents were divorced. I lived 2 different lives. When I was with my dad, I just remember clothes being optional. Like, we spend a lot of time in our pajamas. In fact, a lot of my pictures from childhood have us in our pajamas or not many clothes at all. And I remember there was always people at the house all the time, because my grandma, she was one of those people that like to bring people over and cook really big and stuff like that. And people like to be around, but we weren't, held to any stipulation as far as what we were wearing. We were just the 2 little girls, at the house. And then, but at my mom's house, though, it was very different. Everybody had to have clothes on all the time. And the message that I received in that, without verbally receiving it, was that if we wore anything that showed any parts of our bodies in a quote unquote sexual way, then it would be possible for someone to hurt us. And I certainly don't want to tell anybody else's story. And so when I'm thinking about how my mom was so passionate, that's the word I came up with first, but she was so adamant about us wearing clothes. I only know pieces and bits of her story, but the part that I know that's interwoven with my experience was that she, may have experienced something in her childhood that she's not talked about, that she feels is connected with clothes. And so it was like, it was not even an option for us. And when I was little, I was hot natured. And I think I had sensory issues, which we'll get into a little bit later with that. So I didn't really even like clothes. And then furthermore, I'm a summer baby. We talked about that. Me and you are both Leos, so I didn't want to wear clothes at all. And I was at my other house not having to wear clothes, so I didn't understand why I had to wear clothes in this context. But that's the conscious message I received. Subconsciously, I think I received the message from in my home and society that because I was a girl, again, my body didn't matter. And growing up, we just didn't talk about it, like, at all. I remember being outside playing on my bike at 10 years old, and I had to go use the restroom. So I come in the house and I pull my pants down, and it was black. And I start freaking out. I was a freak out kid anyway. So I started freaking out, like, what is going on? And I remember at the time, my dad's girlfriend was then able to tell me that I started my period. But before that, outside of the, video that we got at school, nobody was talking to me about my body, about my vagina, about periods, and I honestly believe, like, those messages should be received at home. I don't feel like it's the school's responsibility to walk you through that, but if it's hard to deliver a message that you yourself never received or you yourself wasn't privy to. So I don't hold the adults around me responsible for that, because I also know that that's connected to, and these things are connected to my life journey, and it has led me to where I'm at today. So the shame, however, that is laced in not being able to talk about bodies because we all have one is something that we need to actively dismantle in our society, because just like we need to dismantle our the thoughts around pleasure and the thoughts around anything that's literally natural to be, like being naked. That's natural too. So we just
Right.
need to do a bigger we need to do a better job of societally bringing the shame and the guilt and the fear of these topics into awareness so that we can transform them into learning experiences so that people don't have to have these things and grow up and not know what to do with them or get the wrong message about them. Like
Right.
girls, one of the things that I've experienced as a new parent, I decided to breastfeed my child, but both my mom and my mother-in-law, more my mom, have they had sexualized ideas about breast. And so it was like, "Oh, you're going to use your breast to feed your child?" Like it was like, "Oh no, don't like you need to go somewhere and like feed your child because you're not going to pull that out in front of us." It was
Right.
like,
Wow.
"What? Whoa." But what I do, again, I do not fault them, because where did they receive that message?
Yeah, absolutely. And
So,
that's a really good question.
yeah.
So really quick, because you said a lot, and I definitely want to highlight a few of the themes that you kind of talked about. So the first thing you talked about was like the difference, the contrast between, what life was like at your mom's house versus what life was like with your dad. And something that you said that was kind of surprising, because when you started to kind of talk about the difference, I just automatically assumed that, at mom's house, you were going to be more free because you all were both women, and, that you were going to be free to be, clothing optional, or, just more free in your skin. But for you, it was actually your dad's house that you actually experienced that freedom. So I thought that was really interesting. Then also you kind of followed that up by saying that some of the experiences that your mom had maybe growing up informed how she raised you all at home. And I think that's really important to kind of point out, because sometimes the things that we believe or how we choose to walk throughout life aren't really things that we may be drawn to, but it may be things that we're forced into because of our upbringings. And so I love that you touched on that. And then, like you said so much, so many, you dropped so many gems. But even like the concept of, you being a mother and, you choosing to breastfeed is actually crazy that you brought that up, because me and my wife, we had that conversation yesterday, literally talking about, her choosing to breastfeed. She's 32 weeks pregnant right now. And so we're expecting a little bundle of joy, a baby girl.
Mhm.
And
Congratulations.
thank you. And we talked about how, no, like, I don't care like what people think about you feeding our child. And I don't care if you have a blanket or not. Like, I don't put a blanket or a cover over my face when I eat.
Facts.
And I don't want my little girl to feel like she has the cover, because I think even before kids are able to really understand what's going on, I think shame can kind of transfer through the parents. And so I love that you brought that up.
Mhm.
So I guess how did you navigate the difference between the two? Was that more subconscious? You just knew what it was when you went to your dad's house, and then when you got to your mom's house, you knew that like there was a box that exists, and you just found, space in that. So can you talk a little bit about the contrast and how you navigated that experience?
Well, and just in my reflection, just in my spiritual growth and where I'm at right now, I learned a lot of my behaviors that I exhibited was simply for survival. Because, you know, already having, and that's why I'm big on the importance of having stability in the home. Whether it's with one parent or two parents, there's got to be some stability somewhere for the children have to feel grounded. And if they don't feel grounded, then they will act outside of themselves, so and communicate that to everybody else through behavior. And oftentimes we see that behavior maybe it's like off-putting or not societally accepted, but without realizing that all behavior is communication, and they're trying to communicate something. I'm trying to communicate something to you through my behavior. And so I really believe that that is where my I called myself a social chameleon for a long time. My people pleasing. So we have the fight, we have the flight, we have the fawn, we have the freeze. That fawning part, I really feel like that is where my amygdala security, found security in people pleasing. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Wherever you I so transitioning into adulthood, I could literally be anything anybody wanted me to be. And so I mean, even till this day, well, I shouldn't say till this day, because you and I had a private conversation about me stepping back from everything and being like, okay, I need to do an audit. But before that, I could be in any type of social situation and be okay. But I had to think and check myself. I'm like, was I okay? I was making others be okay with me, but was I okay in that situation? And so, yeah, and it's wild that you say, how did I navigate that? Because my sister and I talk about this a lot, because her and I are not cut from the same cloth. We're both Leos, but she's a Leo Capricorn and I'm a Leo Sagittarius. So two completely different energies. I think her rising sign's Virgo. So anyway, two completely different energies moving and navigating the same waters. And I'll tell you that there are times where she felt like I left her. And it wasn't that I was trying to leave her, it was that I was trying to survive.
Right,
I was
right.
trying to survive. And so, but I was not able to articulate that to her then. And honestly, even until this moment, I don't think that I was able to reflect about it in that way. But yeah, I think I just was who I was. I fawned. That was my survival technique, and that's how I made it through that.
So, reflecting on something you just said, right? You mentioned that, prior to recent times, you were like a chameleon. So, you were able to kind of flow throughout social settings and adapt based on the environment. And then
Mhm.
you mentioned, recently you kind of took a pause and you stepped away from society a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about that decision to do that, and the impact that that's had on how you see how you've come to see your body and just your life in general?
So I think because okay, so I quit my job in 2022, and leading up to that, I did not think that I was going to quit my job. So like that last year that I was teaching, because I was a vocal music educator for a public school for 14 years. So I was all the way. I'm a veteran educator, and or I should say I'm a woman who is a veteran educator. Let me change it, because I'm a woman first.
Okay.
Anyway, I was like at the beginning of the year, I'm like, okay, I think I'm gonna do it. And then I got COVID and I was hospitalized, and when I was hospitalized, I was a traveling music teacher, so I was in between two schools. The principals, well, also I should say, because it's COVID, still coming out of COVID, substitutes are like a dime. I mean, literally, you couldn't find anybody to substitute, and especially for music class, and without lesson plans. And so I remember being in the hospital, and at that time, people couldn't visit you. And I got a phone call from both of my principals asking me for lesson plans. And so my husband at the time, he also had COVID, but our son didn't, which was weird. So we're both dying on the couch, and he is not. He's like happy-go-lucky. He had to bring my computer up to the hospital, give it to a nurse, and then give it to me. The nurse then had to give it to me, and I'm on an oxygen tank, and I had to create lesson plans while I'm struggling to breathe in the hospital. And that was my turning point. That was like, okay, I understand the value of my life in this situation, and I value me more. So I turned in the resignation papers as early as I could. And so, but I was leaving something that I had wrapped my whole life around. I literally was like, if anybody met me, I would say I am Dr. Mal, and I wasn't doctor at the time, but I'm Mal, and I'm a teacher. Like that was like synonymous. Like Mal's a teacher. So I had wrapped my identity into that. And then with that, there's all these other stereotypes that go along with being a teacher, right? I'm sure you can think of some, even just thinking about who a teacher is. And so, but I realized that in the pause, so I took after I quit, I haven't been back to a full-time job since. In fact, my somatic system can't even handle being in a full-time position. I didn't realize how dysfunctional I was functioning until I took a pause. And so being able to be aware of my somatic system, how my body feels when something happens, actually helped me to reattach back to my body, because I told you at the beginning I'm a sexual molestation survivor. And one of the survival techniques that you have to have when you've endured that is the detachment from your own body. So I actually wasn't ever attached to my body until I took a pause.
Wow.
And so in the pause, I rediscovered that I feel. So not even dealing with, any type of pleasure, any type of anything, I learned in the pause that I can feel.
Wow.
Because I had ignored my feelings, my own feelings, for so long. I just told you I was a social chameleon. I was able to literally be what anybody wanted me to be, regardless of how I felt about it. And so, or I didn't even think to ask myself how I felt about it, because I was so busy being what I was inauthentically being for someone else, or to fit in. So I forgot the original question, but in the pause, that's what I learned.
No, like that, like, one, kudos to you for having the courage to value yourself above the security, the safety and the security that we're taught that a job can provide.
Preach.
Because a lot of times, well, my dad actually said this one time when I got sick, and I was literally in the hospital. I just got out of ICU, and the first thing I'm thinking about is, like, where's my laptop? I got to finish a work assignment. And my dad had told me, like, son, pause. You need to take a break, take a pause. If you die, they would have somebody serve as an interim assistant director who will take over your position or your job the same day.
Big facts.
So if somebody is able to come in and immediately take over your job and your responsibility, why are you willing to work so hard even when you're not well. And so that was a valuable lesson. And I like I said, kudos to you for doing that. And then the second thing is that kudos to you for also taking a pause. You know, I think in society today, it's almost like popular to have this grind mentality, right? And it wasn't until COVID that I realized that I was living that way, but also that grind mentality was a source of pride. But then I came to realize that the grind mentality, you know, get it by any means and chasing money and all, you know, titles and different things like that, that it was actually toxic for me to do that, because I became so consumed in the chase that I didn't really take time to actually enjoy the experiences that I was having. So kudos to you. So for those listening, the title of this episode is Naked and Free: Parenting, Neurodivergence, and the Boxes We Fit Into. And so I came up with that title based on the conversation that we had, which really sparked my interest, you know, in bringing you on to the podcast. And you were telling me a little bit about your son and how you all interact and how he likes to be. Would you care to elaborate and share a little bit about that?
For sure. So, my sweet baby, my son, he is autistic, and we actually have been on this beautiful journey together since he was 2.5. And I, on my own podcast this whole month of April, I'll be talking about my journey with him and realization. So I won't go into that. But I, he is such a gift to me. I have been able to see myself and know myself more through him. And honestly, I think, I envision all the time him being in another dimension saying, she's it. She is who I need to move through my earthly life with. And so he chose me. He chose me for a time such as this. One of the things that he loves to be is naked and free. And so, as Jay alluded to when I was talking to him, and I was thinking about like how could we connect in his walk of life and podcast, what were we going to talk about? And I wanted to talk about him because he is also a part of and has colored how I view myself and my body, because he is so free. He is so uninhibited with his own body. And earlier we talked about messages that we received from the adults above us, but I also know that up until this point in society, we have not looked, I don't like up and down. I don't like that duality. We have not looked in the opposite age direction, that's what I'll say, to learn. And one of the things that teaching for all these years has taught me is that every relationship is reciprocal. And it doesn't matter how old someone is or how young someone is, you can learn from everyone. And so I say that to say that although I may have received messages from people who are more seasoned than myself about my body, I unlearned and relearned how I should interact with my body because of someone who just entered this earthly plane. So,
like that's really, really interesting. And it's really good to hear with me as an expecting parent. Like, parenthood is about a month and a half away for me at this point. And a lot of times, we think about our past. Like, if you start a therapy session, a lot of times the therapist will reflect and do an intake and ask you about your parents and your cousins and your brothers and your sisters and how they treated you growing up and different things like that. But because I'm not a parent, I haven't had the experience of reflecting on how a child can impact my life and how I see myself. And so I think it's really interesting that you brought that point up, because one of the things that I saw on TikTok that really gave me the idea for this podcast and talking about parenting and its connection to naturism, or just how we see our bodies, was this idea of the naked mom. This is something that was going viral on Instagram, and it was really coming from this young lady who was talking about growing up with the naked mom in a house. And what that looked like was, her friends would be like, hey, I would like to come over and stay for the night, or hey, I want to come over after school. And the girl was like, yeah, that's perfectly fine. They get to the door and she's like, hold on, let me go in real quick and make sure that my mom has clothes on, because it's her house. She pays the bills, and 9 times out of 10, she's going to be naked. And when I heard your story, it sounded like the dynamic is a little different. Like, you have the naked child and you're kind of responding to that in how you live your life, in a sense. Am I correct in that assumption? Or are you indeed the naked mom?
So a little bit of both. I have never liked clothes, I told you, since a young girl, but generally in my home I am naked unless it's super cold. So I'm also cold natured too. I'm in the wrong state. I'm in the wrong climate. Like, I need to be in a warm climate. I know if I was in a warm climate, I would be naked all the time. But in the summertime, generally is when I'm with very little clothes or without clothes in the house. And then in the wintertime, I have a little bit more clothes on, or when it's cold. I have a space heater in every room. So just to give you an indication of my coldness. And so that's what makes me put clothes on, but I'd rather not have clothes on. I'd rather be in a space where I don't have to wear clothes. My son, he is completely bothered by clothes and shoes. In fact, I'm about to move into a new space, and in my new space, I'm going to put a laundry basket by the door, so because as soon as he gets home from school, he completely strips down all the way to nothing. And he's always done that, though. I mean, my whole neighborhood has seen him naked because when he was younger, he used to elope before we got top locks, and he would just be in the cul-de-sac sitting on somebody else's porch, butt ass naked, with no regard to nothing. He goes outside, jump on the trampoline naked, and we have a backyard that butts up to other people's backyard. So it's not like, it's fenced, but you can see everything. And so, as he gets older, though, because he's 8 now, as he gets older, I find myself, because he was just outside naked the other day on the trampoline, and so I'm like chasing him with, I'm chasing him with shorts, trying to get him to put shorts on at least, because when he was little, he was cute. But now he is black, he is male, he is autistic, and he's tall for his age. He's only in first grade, but he's tall. And I don't, all of these intersections are, oh, I should also say that he's nonverbal. So he doesn't speak verbally. And so all of these intersections of characteristics that he has, I don't want anybody to, A, take advantage of him, B, try to diminish or tear him down, or C, look at him like, what is he doing? I just don't want anybody to look at him anyway, which unfortunately, because I teeter between, well, he's free. It's everybody else that's the problem. But also, societally speaking, there is laws against being nude outside, you know what I'm saying? And so, and then there's an assumption in, his height and his age that if he's older, then he knows more. But actually, no, he doesn't. Uh, and it's not, maybe he doesn't, it's not that he doesn't know more. It's just that he's not able to communicate what he knows. We only know what he's able to communicate to us that he knows, but he knows so much more. Just like,
Okay.
In his last IEP meeting, I learned that he knows how to read. I didn't know that. His teachers told me that. So, yeah, that it's this so complex.
Yeah. But I love that you were able to, draw the connection between his identities and how that plays a role in how society sees him. And I
Mhm.
think when you're a person who is black, is male, who lives with autism, I think he has to, or you have to be aware of his identities because the world often won't. And I can definitely see you as a parent really being cautious in how you parent and how you support him because again you want him to be able to feel free and comfortable in his skin, but at the same time I think you understand how our world is set up and how people who identify like him could be in danger because of people's perceptions of what he does know. So yeah, thank you for shining a light on that.
Oh, and that,
Keith.
before we go on, I also want to say that in the autistic world, it is most appropriate to say autistic. Like he is autistic, not lives with autism, on a spectrum, suffers from. All of those are diminutive in the eyes of people who move through the world autistic. And that's something I just recently learned, so I just wanted to make sure
No,
that,
thank you for sharing that. I'll definitely make
yeah.
sure to add that to my language. And kind of thinking about where we were in the conversation, can you talk a little bit about the balance of letting him be free at home while preparing him to live and thrive in a closed society?
Well, I balance is such a good word actually because it is that is something that I seek to create for him. So, for example, my home is my safe haven. Period. And so I don't really like to invite people over to my house. And like I tell people, and I have said it, now I'm saying it publicly. If you call me your friend and you haven't been to my house, you're not my friend. I'm just going to say that straight up because my home is so sacred and energies that I invite into my home are intentional. And so, like, I know you, but you're not really my friend. And you're not a close friend. Anyway, I say that because there's never a time that I want to make my son feel uncomfortable in his home by making him put on clothes to appease other people's comfortability level. Because this is also his safe haven. And I don't want him to feel uncomfortable in his home. So, and especially, and I think my experience as a child helps to shape that because I also don't trust a lot of people around him because he cannot advocate for himself. And I look at my own situation, even when I did advocate for myself, no one listened to me. I can only imagine that being 10 times worse, being nonverbal, unable to, and being highly, sensitive in your body, and then having other people take advantage of that. Like, I don't play about him. So if I'm inviting you to my home, one of the things you must know is that you going to catch a booty cheek from my son. You going to see, him running across the couch being as free as possible. Why? Because he deserves to feel free in his home. We have worked on being outside because my son has stripped down in grocery stores before. And I turned around, I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't have any clothes on. I'm like, oh goodness, having a whole freak out. One time we were at of his father's military outings. It was like for children at the base or whatever. And there was like this jumping thing and my son was too hot. And so he started taking his clothes off and the first thing to be taken off was his pants. So I'm talking to somebody, I turn around and then I just see this half dressed Eight-year-old boy with all these other kids just running around this blow up thing, and I'm like, oh my, like I was so mortified. I'm like, I run to him really quick, and I'm like trying to protect him, but I'm like then thinking in my head like, this is silly. Like I don't know how long he's been naked because I've been sitting here having this whole conversation, and people have already seen like he ain't got nothing nobody's seen before. But then at the same time, it was a protection. Like I want to protect you because I don't know who's up in here, you know. So it was like it's like a constant fight within myself,
Yeah.
you know, to protect him. And so, like, my number one thing with him is just about protection. And I know that he's protected in his home because of the space I facilitate here for him.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm loving these stories because I think that the stories that you're choosing to tell, it speaks to the tension that exists between teaching social norms and then honoring a child's like natural self. And to be honest, I wish that as adults we could still have that childlike innocence and that we could go about life living in the same way that he is. And so
Well, and not just him, children do.
exactly.
I was just at a restaurant the other day, and this little girl had macaroni and cheese all over her face. And I looked over at her and I looked at her parents and I was like, man, don't you wish we could just have macaroni and cheese all over our face? And her parents were like, well, I do. Like,
Right. And
you know, like I would say, like, you know, I wish we could be like them, but we can be like them.
exactly.
We should be like them.
But we live in a box,
Yes.
right?
We live in the box.
But we live in this box, and you know, I don't know. I call my box adulthood. I feel like there's different expectations that exist from children to adults, and rightfully so in some ways, right? Like, although no matter how free we want to live, there's certain things that as an adult we just shouldn't do, or we do because of societal expectations. I'm not saying that all societal expectations are wrong, because some of them exist to keep us safe and well governed within the common societal structure. However, the macaroni on the face thing, like, how cool would that be to, you know, just eat and enjoy your food and not worry about being polished, or if I drop something on my shirt, or if I spill some juice, to wipe it off and keep going and live my life and not be so conscious of how I'm walking around and experiencing life. So can you talk a little bit about, I guess, the box that we live in? Who made the box for what's comfortable in society?
Well, when you find out, let me know, because I struggle with the box so much. And I will say that in the pause, it really helped me to dive into all parts of myself, not just physical, but also mental, spiritually, emotionally, financially, all the things. And so one of the boxes that I had to dismantle was my relationship with my higher self and my relationship with God. Because the box that, first of all, the box that we put God in, and we put human characteristics on the energy that is omnipresent, omnipotent, and everywhere at the same time, and in all time. Like, how can you put human characteristics on an energy that is so vast and abundant like that? How did that happen? And so that moved me into being a non-religious spiritual person and not accepting the dogma of religion as evidence of there being a higher power. So that also has shifted many of my vantage points about many things. And you're right. Who made this box? Well, I think, and my reflections, the boxes have been made to keep us into control. So you talked about a society being well governed. while I agree with that, to some point, what's the balance line between well governed and control? Because I feel like rules only apply to those who don't have the power to make the rules. The people who have the power to make the rules don't follow the rules.
Hmm.
And so
Okay.
basically, I'm saying that we continually perpetuate the rules because the rules benefit those who ascribe to the ideas of the patriarchy. And
Okay.
I'm not,
Get deep with it. Okay.
yeah, I'm not, I mean, I am team balance. I'm not team one or the other. So, not matriarchal society, although a matriarchal society is peaceful, not a completely patriarchal society like the society that we ascribe to and we perpetuate subconsciously and consciously, but a middle,
Okay.
an understanding of both energies can exist. And I believe, and not just because I believe, but also because I practice astrology. Astrologically speaking, we're in Pluto and Aquarius. We are going to move into unlearning and relearning the balance because a balanced society can't exist. It can't exist.
Well,
One conscious.
at least you're hopeful.
Oh no, I'm 100% hopeful. Is it? Are we going to get there without chaos? No, because change doesn't happen unless there's uncomfortability that goes along with it. So, yes, there will be chaos in the change, but ultimately, we are going to be able to go outside and say, "Hey, neighbor, can I borrow an egg? Can we borrow something that we don't have in our house? Hey, neighbor, I need help with something. Hey, do you want to come over? Because right now we're siphoned in our houses. Everybody's in their own house, dealing with their own stuff. And, what message did you receive when you were younger about things that happened in your house?
Yeah, you don't tell anybody.
You don't tell
You don't tell
anybody.
family business. You keep that
You
to
don't, yeah,
yourself.
you keep it to yourself. But how does that help the family?
That's a really, really good question. And we could probably spend a whole hour.
We could probably spend a whole hour talking about that, but I say all that to say these are the boxes
Yeah, yeah.
that we have created in society, and it is up to us to reflect on how do I perpetuate the box and what work am I doing on myself to dismantle it. We have to have those conversations with ourselves. We have to
Exactly.
do a personal audit, and especially in body positivity. I think that's where it starts
Yeah.
because body positivity is not just about your external body. Body positivity is mostly about your internal body.
Hmm.
Shifting from the idea of ego and naming something to just accepting what it is. Eckhart Tolle does some work with this. I would encourage you to listen to some Eckhart Tolle stuff because he talks about ego consciousness and how we're all stuck in ego. Even describing what we do is egotistical. You know why? Because subconsciously, when we say, hey, this is what I do, we subconsciously go into superiority complex mode.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
say, like, oh, they do that. Well, I do this, so I'm already, like we pit ourselves up against each other. And that causes separatism when actually we are one. And although I don't agree with the Adam and Eve story literally, allegorically speaking, that Adam and Eve, that innocence of seeing each other for the first time and being naked and not having a problem with it, that is how we are in our original sense. This is who we are.
Yeah. But that's I'm glad that you mentioned that, right? The origin story as told by Christianity, because and that's also another reason why I really love these conversations, and I really love the fact that you can have two people come together who may have different ideas or different beliefs, but yet we can still have a really constructive conversation because, like, I am religious, right? And I subscribe to the idea of Adam and Eve, But I also think that people's interpretation of that is skewed a little bit, right? The idea was that, they ate of the tree of knowledge or good and evil, and they were aware that they were naked and that they were ashamed. But nowhere in the text did it say that God wanted us to be ashamed of our bodies, right? So even if for somebody who doesn't believe in Adam and Eve and they're just looking at the story, I think there's valuable things that we can learn about how we can project things on God, or just how we can take things that we believe and how those belief systems can be impacted by misinformation.
Right.
So thank you for that. We've been talking now for almost an hour. So I definitely wanted to give you a chance. As you mentioned earlier, you're somebody who's doing a lot of amazing things. I think with the first episode that I heard of yours was about self-love, and in listening to that episode, I knew that I had to reach out, and I knew that I had to have you on the podcast because you have an amazing platform, and I definitely wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about all the things that Dr. Mal is doing.
Mhm. So I appreciate that, and thank you for listening. Like you said earlier, my podcast is called A Monday Moment with Dr. Mal. I am streaming on all major podcast platforms, including YouTube. Honestly, I do this podcast, but I'm not getting any money for it right now. But I should also say, with that, that abundance doesn't always come in the form of money. I have been healing while teaching through my podcast. And so it literally has been a gift to me. And I would love it if you subscribed and went to listen. I have a Beacons account. I don't know if you're familiar. So beacons.ai / my brand name, When Mallory Lives, and then / podcast. And you can find all of the links to all of my podcasts. I also am a co-founder of a business called Bell's Garden, lowercase, bells like bell hooks and garden. And my goal and mission with this business is to help to support Black girls in suburban or predominantly white communities navigating these spaces as one or few in their educational spaces. And my goal with that is to really help to build the inside, so intrapersonal development, so that they can stand as pillars and not move away from who they are because their environment is forcing them to acclimate to something that makes them feel comfortable, that makes the people in the environment feel comfortable and makes the girl uncomfortable. Assimilation makes anybody uncomfortable. So then I'm a mom. I have my baby keeps me busy. I currently do direct a choir, but I'm not going to be directing the choir much longer. I have 3rd through 6th grade students. I love my babies. And I'm in a transition again, and I love it. I love it here. I'm so grateful for this moment. God has really amped up my blind faith right now. It's just so beautiful to witness the power of the Most High and how, like, when you are really authentically saying, I release this burden that I have to you. And a figurative you, because when you surrender, you have transformative experiences. When I had a transformative experience, and I just talked about it on my last podcast, I got to my car and my body did not know how to process all the emotions that I felt, and it was shaking. I was literally shaking. But it was from joy. It wasn't from sadness. It was from joy. It's just my body didn't know how to process it, and I felt like crying, laughing, balling up in a ball, and jumping up and down all at the same time. So because I could do none of those things, I just was shaking. And so just having those experiences just let me know the power of surrender, the power of letting go of control, and the power of knowing and having faith that everything is going to work out how it's supposed to, and nothing is happening to you. Everything is happening for you, the greater good of you. So, yeah, check me out.
Well, thank you so much for joining me again. We definitely have a gem with this episode. I can't wait to get it out there so that people can listen and respond to the content. But thank you all for listening. This is the Bear With Me podcast. Again, I am your host, Jay. Until next time.